Look how having unchristian friends and being involved in unchristian activities, sexual immorality, drinking, whatever, degenerates you over time.
As a female, it's become so easy to post that picture on Instagram, show a little more booty, get a lot more likes, get some feedback, whether your intentions are good, bad, or whatever, but you're going to get the attention, you're going to get the DMs, you're going to get a release of dopamine. At the same time, it's men that are promoting that.
They're modifying the behavior.
Right, we're modifying the behavior. And then when we want, and then the women do that because it's a temporary fix, when in fact, if they had discipline and delayed gratification, they might work on their character, which is harder to do, but in the long run, it then makes them more valuable.
Absolutely.
The flip side is men. When we get frustrated with a situation, then we go to the porn, and the porn is there for us, and then we don't have to invest in ourselves to become the kind of man that doesn't need porn to find the women of our desires.
Yeah.
Am I explaining this correctly?
Yes, you are. Like essentially what pornography, well, the thing is, as much as I'm talking about women, they don't get here alone. Women in certain cultures will not post a bikini picture because the men in that culture will not reward that behavior. They won't reinforce it. They might reinforce the opposite, where they will go nowhere near you. But we're living in a world now where men are reinforcing that. They're reinforcing the kind of OnlyFans girls. She's getting the most followers and she's getting the most likes. So what's happening is we're modifying the women's behavior. The men are modifying it by rewarding the wrong behavior and punishing the right behavior. So the women that are actually quite discreet and working on their character don't get as many brand deals, and they don't get as much accolade on social media, and they don't get a platform. Whereas the women that are exposing themselves and selling themselves, they get the most reward and praise in this day and age. So it's not just the women's fault. We have to think about who's rewarding them, and then it's almost like a form of conditioning, a form of operant conditioning. We're kind of creating the woman that they actually don't want to be with. They're molding and rewarding and punishing all the traits until they create a woman that they actually are incompatible with, and then have to replace her with porn because they don't like the woman they created or the woman they selected. So it's dark times, unfortunately.
So as men, we're creating the kind of women that we ultimately don't want.
Exactly.
And then women are creating the type of men that they ultimately don't want.
Yeah.
So look at the study here. Single mothers are at the highest risk of poverty. So people with a family, you see top line there on the poverty line, only 7.3% of united families, father, mother, child, are at risk of poverty. Only 7.3%. Then a single father has a 25% risk, and single mothers have a 55.3% risk of poverty. Much, much higher than when the united family, as God wanted it, staying together, can thrive. Now the problem with this she was obviously now speaking about immorality in dating and sexual immorality, and that is the precursor and the pre-runner of the family, because that is the kind of picking and choosing people do before they get together as a family. Even if they don't marry, they start making children in that setup. And God told us how a family works. A family is a father and a mother together in a house. So as people move away from the Bible and God's principles, you see these problems escalating. Listen to this data of escalating sexual immorality amongst women, because people are moving away from God's principles and therefore the destruction of society.
Now, I'm going to show you a whole bunch of graphs in this video, and they all tell a very similar story, which is one of increasing moral degeneracy when it comes to female sexual behavior as the result of cultural changes. Like, look at this graph. This goes all the way back to 1937, and that is amazing to actually have data tracked for over 80 years. What you're seeing here is the percentage of men and women who were in love with their first sexual partner. Men are in the green and women are in the orange. As you can see, men are pretty consistent. It doesn't really change much. It just sort of hovers around 50% through all the decades. Women, on the other hand, have changed a lot. You can see that there's been this steady decrease, and fewer women have been in love with the man that they lost their virginity to. Back in the late 30s, over 80% of women were in love with their first sexual partner. But by the time you get to 2014, that number had halved to 40%. That is significant because this may be the first time, perhaps in all of human history, that women are now less likely to be in love with a man that they lose their virginity to than men. But of course, they're going to continue with this mainstream myth that when it comes to relationships, men are these disgusting hound dogs and women are these perfect angels and women are these hopeless romantics. And they'll keep pushing this line despite, the existence of that irritating thing we call actual data. As you can see, in younger women, there has been a massive change. Like just a few decades earlier, only 30% of young women would say that they would be willing to have sex without being in love. That's not that long ago. That's just in 1992. But now, 80% of women say that they don't care if they're in love with the person that they're having sex with. And it's only a tiny minority that look for that prerequisite of love. You can actually plot this trend. You can see that every single year, love gets less and less important when it comes to sex. And there's every indication that that trend is going to continue in the future. Now, you might think that this just indicates changes in sexual attitudes across the whole culture. We're destigmatizing sex, there's less shame, going through this sexual revolution. But if that was true, then it would apply culture-wide, equally to men and women. But if we look at the data, we see that that is clearly not the case. That is an incredible statistic. It means that young women are twice as likely as young men to have had 2 sexual partners in the last year. Twice as likely. That is a huge discrepancy, and it reflects women's increased freedom to be able to indulge their hypergamy. At first glance, you think, well, this doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't the numbers be equal? For every woman that needs to have sex, there should be a corresponding man, so the numbers should be the same. But what you're seeing here is the societal trend for sexual access to be concentrated in the hands of fewer and fewer men. As women feel empowered to indulge their hypergamy, they only want to sleep with the top men, which means that those really high status individuals, those men who sit at the top of the pyramid, are having lots and lots of sex with lots of women, but the average guy is increasingly left out.
So this is important to understand. Women are looking around and sleeping with a lot more men, unchristian women, as certain areas of the world become more unchristian, like it was before Christianity. A king or a chief or wealthy man would not follow the Bible, like the Bible says, one husband and one wife. He could have hundreds of wives, or 20, 30, 40 wives, depending on his resources. So now successful men do not care about Christianity or God's principles, where it says if you fornicate, that means sex before marriage, outside marriage, you will go to hell. You have to repent, marry the girl, stay with the girl. So they don't care about God's principles anymore. So it becomes like pre-Christian Rome, where rich, successful, attractive, whatever men could have many, many women. And average men don't have access to women. Average man does not have access to women because women do not choose them and do not believe in marrying a man, having children with him, and being faithful. Many godless women nowadays believe in having sex with as many attractive men as possible, and love or commitment is not needed to have sex with a man. So why stay with a man your whole life and do the difficult job of raising a family, even though it's infinitely more rewarding? So it becomes a total immoral, chaotic state, and children are brought up in homes that are single-parent homes.
One cause is that young women are more likely to be shacking up with older men. Again, this is driven by hypergamy. Women are seeking those top status men, and she might only be 22 years old, but why would she want to be with a 22-year-old boy who hasn't achieved anything yet, when the men in their 30s who are, high status and high wealth, they're showing her interest? Like I've said in my other videos, when it comes to dating, being in your late teens and early 20s is one of the roughest periods of men, because all of the women of your age group that you're interested in are also the women that every other man of all the other age groups are interested in. And so the competition is fierce, and because you haven't really achieved much in your life, you're sort of at the bottom of the pyramid. Another explanation that is very rarely spoken about is that women are looking at other women as viable sexual options and just leaving men out of the equation altogether. Look at these two graphs. In this top one, you're looking at women who admit that their sexual attraction goes beyond just men. It used to be quite low, hovering at around 10% a few decades earlier. But if you see the figures for 2015, for young women, it has jumped up to 40%. That is a huge percentage of women who are explicitly bisexual, and there's every indication that that trend is going to continue. Continuous downward trend where the age in which women were losing their virginity just gets lower and lower and lower. By 2009, it had gotten to 16.5 as the average age for women, and that is 11 years ago. There was every indication that the trend was going to continue, so who knows how low it is now.
And that's a problem with lives not based on God, not based on God's principles. They become more and more immoral, and you become more and more a worthless, detestable, ugly to the core person over time. So the problem with being involved in godless acts and godless people is at the end of your life, you will not recognize yourself because you are so bad. But if you walk God's path, He recreates you and your life becomes more and more amazing.
They're becoming a person they don't actually want to be, and men are creating women that they don't actually want to be with. They're liking and commenting and trying to be with that really sexy, narcissistic kind of woman, and then when they're with her, they're really disappointed. But there was plenty of nice, kind women that you ignored to focus on those women. So we're almost modifying femininity into a person we actually can't connect with.
Now, it's one thing to like someone's post on Instagram that's that type of woman. In the real world, men can recognize a woman who is grounded and has great values and is someone they want to be with long term. So won't that always win out?
I think in the real world that applies for men of a different generation. They can definitely distinguish between the younger generation cannot. And the reason being is they are so over-sexualized. They are so exposed to sexual women, whether it's through pornography, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is. So they just think this is how women are. They don't know the opposite. They don't know the more chaste woman or the one that is slightly has more discretion when it comes to exposing herself. They only know the ones that are willing and prepared to do it. So this is what they think women come as. So I think the generation has changed so much that the younger generation don't have any discernment at all. And so, and it's not just the women's fault. The women are also being left with men who are, almost addicted to pornography, and as a result are over-sexualized as well. And therefore, she feels like she has to keep up with this kind of desires he's created in his head. So we've got this young generation that are so disconnected, but they're so sexualized. So it leads to short-term mating strategies.
Okay, and now if you're a woman and you're hearing this and they're agreeing, what can they do to not become this woman?
It's incredibly difficult to be a young woman in this day and age, because if you try and withhold yourself, there'll be a bunch of guys putting pressure on you on a daily basis saying, send a picture, this girl does it, that girl does it. And if you go on your For You page, all your peers are doing that. So it's incredibly difficult. The only thing I would say is that the only thing that can separate you from this situation is having a set of intrinsic values and morals that will surpass your external appearance. And what I mean by that is working on something that is unique to you. If we work on just your looks, everybody has good looks in this day and age. Everybody can put a bit of makeup on, add a filter and look great. But if you work on something that is unique to your soul, it doesn't mean you have to be super intelligent. You could just be super gifted at something, or you could be super caring, or you can be super nurturing or kind, whatever it is. If you work on something that is more intrinsic, you're more likely to be irreplaceable. And you're also more likely to derive self-esteem from that overall character, rather than just one very vacuous trait, which is again very difficult to do when you're 17, 16 years old.
I actually think it was always difficult to become a person of worth, to be an amazing person. I don't think many people are even trying. I mean, they're 16, 17, 14, 15, and they're getting their first boyfriend and girlfriend. I mean, you first have to become a person who is following your own passion, doing God's work, developing yourself, becoming skillful at some other craft that will become your life work. Before you get a boyfriend or girlfriend, it seems like that's the goal, to get a boyfriend and girlfriend. You get a wife so that you two can work on God's work for the future together and make a team. It's not like some box you tick. And first, you got to find yourself. Look at this here. Don't edit your soul according to fashion. Rather, follow your most intense obsession mercilessly. Find your passion. Find what you love to do. In whatever area, read, learn about the most amazing things that really set you on fire. The most important thing almost you can do is reading and learning when you're young. And then after that, you start doing things like if it's horse riding, endurance riding, jumping, whatever. Link up with the best people in that field and they will help you go further. Just listen here again. I think what the lady said here, it's incredibly difficult to be a young lady of worth nowadays. Basically just paraphrasing what she said. But I think it has always been. You have to sow to reap.
It's incredibly difficult to be a young woman in this day and age, because if you try and withhold yourself, there'll be a bunch of guys putting pressure on you on a daily basis saying, send a picture, this girl does it, that girl does it. And if you go on your For You page, all your peers are doing that. So it's incredibly difficult. The only thing I would say is that the only thing that can separate you from this situation is having a set of intrinsic values and morals that will surpass your external appearance. And what I mean by that is working on something that is unique to you. If we work on just your looks, everybody has good looks in this day and age. Everybody can put a bit of makeup on, add a filter and look great. But if you work on something that is unique to your soul, it doesn't mean you have to be super intelligent. You could just be super gifted at something, or you could be super caring, or you can be super nurturing or kind, whatever it is. If you work on something that is more intrinsic, you're more likely to be irreplaceable. And you're also more likely to derive self-esteem from that overall character, rather than just one very vacuous trait.
To become a remarkable person, you have to put in the work. There's no elevator to success. You got to take the stairs. What's it? 3 words. Freaking hard work.